It is May 1942. The Axis powers are slowly coming to an end as the Allies push further into their campaign against them. Hitler's Third Reich, at that time, just eliminated over 5 to 6 million Jewish civilians. Their war is still raging with the Soviet Union in places such as Stalingrad. World War II, the widest war to ever be fought. Over 70 million fatalities were calculated, making it a very deadly war.
Inside the country of Nazi Germany, normal life continues. The life of an adult was just like anyone else's life. You could watch a movie and live a normal, everyday life, if you are excluding your obligation to participate in the rallies typically held by Hitler to inform his perfect race of his progress of world domination. The perfect race: blue eyes, blonde hair, and pure German blood. Many were a part of this race, and Hitler's plan was for them to inhabit the new world he was creating. A Nazi world, a fascist world.
Education was prevalent in Nazi Germany as Nazism had to be taught at an early age. Most of the subjects taught in school were a lot like yours, except more focused around racial and militaristic principles. Children were even taught the Nazi salute in an early age. It may have been pretty obvious why resistance groups started to form at that time.
Teenagers were often convinced by posters and radio propaganda, which was popular at the time, to join the Hitler Youth. From age 10 to 18, the young men were trained for the military, while the young women lived regular lives. The BDM, or the Bundeswehr Mädel, was the female counterpart of the Hitler Youth. They lived normal lives, participating in many regular activities, as the young men exercised to their limits and spent every day training for war.
Annexation of countries, skirmishes all over the place. It was very hard to keep it all sealed up airtight. Now many resistance groups formed, but there was only one that affected the most people in its short existence. The White Rose, or Die Weiße Rose, as the Germans called it.
The founding members of the White Rose were siblings Hans and Sophie Scholl. Other important members included Willy Graf and Christoph Probst, and Alexander, also known as Schrunk, as his friends called him. Hans and Sophie began to hear tales of many Jews being exterminated by the Nazi government. They could not bear it, nor could they keep themselves quiet for much longer. Willie spent 18 months at the time in the Warsaw Ghetto before he met up with Hans and Schrunk. They became good friends and retreated from the Russian front back to their own country, where they rendezvoused with Sophie and Christoph, who was Schrunk's best friend. Many other teenagers joined the effort as well, as it spread quicker in a school environment rather than in a large city.
So then the young men and women started their work. The White Rose spread their information using small letters called leaflets. The leaflets were in German, and they contained information on the Nazi government's actions that were not talked about in Hitler's rallies.
The first leaflet spoke of fascism and corruption of the German government. The second, the extermination of the Jews and forced labor. And the third, the evil dictatorship that governed Germany. All the leaflets were different because they each covered a specific area of the cruelty of the Nazi government, but all stayed on the main topic. Many of the leaflets quoted Aristotle, Goethe, and the Bible. How did the White Rose actually spread those papers around, though?
Hans and Schurk witnessed how the Germans treated the Jews firsthand in the Warsaw Ghetto. So writing things that the Nazis were doing was so much easier once you see it up close. The entire persecution and the extermination of the Jews really struck the resistance group. To them, it was completely immoral.
In the White Rose, only the teenagers were active in the resistance activities. Why? Adults did not involve themselves in those activities due to their fear of the Nazi government and the Gestapo. These kids, however, knew their work was dangerous. They knew if they were caught at any point by the government, they would be executed. After some time passed, an adult joined their ranks. the kids managed to recruit their professor, Dr. Kurt Huber, who wrote the 6th leaflet, which was probably one of the most powerful and beautiful pieces of work ever produced by the White Rose.
They would mail them to their fellow students and professors at the university. They would also leave them in public transportation for other people to find. They needed to spread their information as much as possible. Eventually, they wanted to expand and bring more attention to their cause. So they made stencils, and they began to paint with black tar "Down with Hitler" on many university and church walls. They also wrote "Freedom" in all caps in many places as well. All of this made the Gestapo, the German secret police, very angry.
And Hans knew this, but insisted that she stayed. Hans became a bit underprotective with the entire group. He left the leaflets out in the open in his apartment. He wasn't making this very secretive anymore. Dr. Huber left after this and never printed his 6th leaflet. Skirk also said his farewells to Hans, and he set his uniform and documents having to do with the White Rose on fire. Willie also said goodbye, as he knew better than to be so open with government defiance. Hans became more and more careless with the entire operation as time went on.
The 6th leaflet contained things such as demands to the Nazis to give the people their personal property back. It also mentioned the working class and their unfair treatment. And most of all, it mentioned how the people needed to be free. However, that beautiful chunk of language written by the doctor was never spread, as tensions began to rise when Hans brought his new girlfriend to the White Rose meeting. The teenagers decided that there was one last spreading of the leaflets they had to do. Hans and Sophie Scholl ran through their university, leaflets in 2 black suitcases that they carried with them, and began to spread them. As they cut more and more classes, they were eventually spotted by some students who had ties with the Gestapo. That day, they were arrested and brought out of their university. As they were let out, Hans yelled at Gisela to tell his fellow members that he won't be there for lunch. The Gestapo heard this and arrested another student, thinking that that was the kid Hans was shouting to. But they eventually found out sooner that it was Gisela Hans was shouting at. Gisela was brought in for interrogation by the Gestapo. Since she was a hardcore Nazi, she wasn't going to lie at the Gestapo. She told the German secret police every name associated with the White Rose, and in small groups, the members were tried in the courts.
In interrogation, each blamed themselves, one another, and no one. It didn't matter. They were all guilty. On February 22nd, 1943, Hans, Sophie, and Christoph Probst were all condemned and sent to be executed at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. On a later date, July 13th, 1943 to be exact, Dr. Kurt Huber was executed, along with an Alexander Skirmorel, who helped write the first 4 leaflets. And at a later date, Willie and Skirk were all executed as well.
Even though all of the members were dead and their mess thoroughly cleaned up, some teenagers in the same university found the leaflets that they had written. They read them and became highly influenced by their cause. They found a typewriter and began the mass copying of the leaflets. When the war was very close to ending, a British airplane flew over Germany and dropped many, many copies of the powerful and beautiful 6th leaflet that Dr. Kurt Huber wrote on Germany. So even from the grave, they were still able to spread their work. Their lives were gone, but their cause was not. They were heroes and visionaries, standing up face to face with death and doing so for the millions of people who were being affected by the Nazis. Today, they have a monument in Germany, shown here, dedicated to them. It depicts the leaflets written and spread by the members, and also newspaper clippings that featured their faces and reports on their actions.
Many people were affected during and after their resistance. We were taught to fight for what is right, and we are truly unwavering in that if the cause is good and just. The White Rose Resistance Group stood up for their rights and the rights of others, and took up their responsibility of standing up to their dictating government and the acts of tyranny they were creating.